you are with the Sensorica platform, kind of how it works. But basically, the different people who are kind of using that platform can organize either in the context of just a specific project, or they can actually form these communities around kind of issues that interest them, and then kind of embark on like a series of projects, right, and have them all fall under that kind of broad header. So Good Labs kind of falls into that space. It's a community that's kind of focused on more the infrastructure and kind of the practices that that enable these types of communities to work. So it's really focused on kind of consolidating the space of peer-to-peer activity. So you have all these organizations that are maybe doing their own thing. Maybe you get the cryptocurrency people, and you've got the people who are maybe more interested in like governance, or all these different kind of peer-to-peer spaces, and kind of trying to draw the boundaries around what defines kind of the larger what I'm calling social production domain. What are all kind of the distinct communities? What do their boundaries look like? What are their defining characteristics? Just to kind of provide a broad map of where these things all fit together, and also to create some kind of methodology that allows us to be more of a crowdsourced effort. So rather than us having to kind of take that whole thing on ourselves, basically put the tools in the hands of the people who are living within those communities.
When you say structure, in my mind, you're talking about governance, you're talking about tools, you're talking about methodologies of work, and I would add the fourth dimension, which is the culture that has to be nurtured. That is kind of the glue between all that. So the collaborative entrepreneurship is a sort of a program. It's an effort for us to kind of formalize and externalize the tacit knowledge that could be then applicable in other contexts. It's a sort of a methodology that makes you think about your value system, and how to put in place some economics for sustainability, and how to stabilize that system so that it can be a reliable economic agent and not just an ad hoc group of people that are there because they have fun, and when things get hard, they just stay, or serious, or when there is a lot of responsibility on their shoulders, well, they move on to something else. What kind of patterns they share? So what is this language of composing economic models within this peer-to-peer world? So this is why I thought that it's something that you might like, because also as an incubator, you might have people that come with different crazy ideas. So how are you going to guide them? Like, okay, so this is your idea. These are the patterns that you can use. And if you look in the traditional business world, actually, we have a file. I can share it with you, like 60 business patterns. But this is the traditional world. We don't have that list for the peer-to-peer world. This is the traditional world. Here's the 60 business patterns. And guess what? Anything that you can think of in the traditional world is just a composition of these things. These are the building blocks of any business out there. Okay, and then they just use these ingredients and to have their own sauce. But these are the building blocks of a business. And what we're trying to do with the mapping is to understand, well, what is this finite number of patterns in this collaborative economy, and how do we categorize? Because they're not the same. They're not the same. Okay. And then when people come into your incubator, you can say, well, here's the list of ingredients. Okay, let's prepare a pudding for you. There's a grammar in the composition of like economic models.
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem is, computer developers have been talking about libraries and modular Lego like structures for building, but they have these structures, but so far, despite the amount of talk, it's really hard to build these structures in terms of ideas, and there's been too little work in terms of doing that. So Tiberius and I have had conversations in the past about pattern language, and we've not only developed the way, so we're kind of meta, so we've developed a way to develop pattern languages for any kind of thing that you need pattern languages for. So we do have a process for doing that, if that helps. We use Miro for that, and we have like our pattern jam process. One, I would like to see greater development from the whole community of a system of norms, of social norms, which we can develop that make it easier for us. We don't have to reinvent the wheel in every community about kind of conflict resolution and moderation of communications and stuff like that, because that's just exhausting. And so I'd like to kind of build up a body of work there and address some problems that keep happening in our communities over and over again. And then there's a question of a formalized bridge between the communities, like making visible what we have in common, what we have to learn from you, and then what you have to learn from us.
So yeah, ethos is, when you talk about providing help to organizations as an incubator, it's part of the toolbox. You have a governance tool, you have an ethos tool on which the governance should be built normally, and then you have some tools for, the kitchen tools, the communication tools, the coordination tools, the repositories that you have for your data.
I feel like the real big kind of challenge I would think for somebody who finds themselves in need of that asset is just kind of being able to shop among the range of options. So you mentioned that there was one particular ethos or the set of norms that was presented to you, and you didn't find that it applied to your case. But there might be others that do apply, and you find maps on perfectly to your case. And then the challenge would just be how do you kind of navigate all of that? How do you kind of discover those assets, right?
A unique role to play that sounds like maybe is in your bailiwick around conceiving of an emergent kind of bottom-up process that employs narrative heavily and kind of a heartbeat that helps to create these little reflection pauses for groups to build upon their own governance autochthonously, like out of the ground, out of their own ground, and in their own context, at their own time, along their own path. And that this could be kind of the missing ingredient that helps solve some problems of this kind of chaotic situation, so that increasingly complex, fast-paced, pluralistic, multi-centric, whatever, however you want to put it, kind of post-colonial, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's exceedingly complex for people to navigate, and then with the distance online, increasingly online, and the social, limitations of social translucence and varying levels of that. There's a unique place for a process to facilitate the partial emergence from within the actual context of that pathway of the norms. Social norms and the moderation of an NRA chat group for wild game chefs is going to be extremely different set of norms from PETA, vegan PETA recipe sharing site, right? I mean, it's just the case. That is just the case. The norms for moderation will not overlap 100%. And if you try to do that, things are going to go off the rails pretty quick. So we have to kind of maybe accept that that's the world we're in, and that that's something that hasn't yet been addressed effectively by anyone, and is a unique challenge to this particular context, where you have these bottom-up emergent systemic innovators, networked, peer-to-peer, et cetera, that creates the very challenge that that makes it so hard just to not pull off the shelf. Here's our mission statement and here's our values. Here's our corporate values. Here's our mission statement. Sign up, salute, goodbye, done. Not going to fly.
That we created are very, very Sensorica. They're like, I don't know, they're part of our organism. So to be able to trace back the origin and remix it and release it under the same license. We spoke about Good Labs. You know, I think Good Labs is producing these patterns, does the mapping, produces the patterns, and this is, for me, this is the building block. You don't have to build everything from scratch. Yeah. Evolution doesn't work like that. Okay, yeah. Evolution builds on already an existing pool of genes and goes by small mutations and trial and error. So suppose as an incubator, you know, you take into consideration, well, some of the stuff that Sensorica has developed, some of the stuff that WeShare has developed, or other type of networks like that have developed, and you use that as a, you know, part of your large services of incubation and acceleration of these peer-to-peer initiatives. So that's a formal bridge that we created with WeShare, and it worked for a long time, and it was pretty good. And we organized together a very, I don't know, in my book, it was a successful event, you know, database in both networks.
Okay.
Okay, some parts of the database were shared. It's like twins that share some guts. I don't know, they share a hip together. You know what I'm saying? So that relationship was perfect because they liked what we did. Okay. And so we were the star speakers on the events. Okay. You know, so that was perfect. That was perfect. But yeah, we were tied at the hip. We were sharing information, right. You know, because we shared some parts of our databases. Not just the material, but also the people that can flow through these bridges, right? You know what I'm saying? Right. But that's cool. That's the network of network thing, you know. So if you are the incubator and you can use these methods for collaborative entrepreneurship, I could be there and I could present myself as part of your thing. You know what I'm saying?
What are some like genuine alternatives, like that kind of support the kind of more nomadic culture? And we've talked about kind of the seasteading model of like, you know, basically all these are just free floating entities, and there is no kind of nation, so to speak, that they're all like members of, but they're just kind of all in international waters, and they kind of form these, you know, ad hoc relationships for a time. And that those that kind of relationship forming is established by kind of common protocols, but there is no need for kind of that infrastructure to kind of hold us together permanently or to identify us with one another. So
I think what might be interesting about the bridges is they kind of show where people overlap specifically and allow groups to actually, because groups don't really know themselves and people don't know themselves, and they often people and groups, they do not know the thing that they do the most naturally, that comes the easiest, is sometimes what they're appreciated for by others the most, but they never see that because it comes so easily that they discount it.
The network of networks is just building itself organically. It's like organic chemistry. It's proximity. Molecules find each other, they have a valence, boom, they form a bond. Networks that are bound together somehow. Right. You see what I'm saying? And then this bridge might survive some time. We don't have to think that it's permanent, because nothing is permanent. Like Tim was saying before, we have this thing in our minds to build like these permanent things, and let's build this structure, then we'll come and this structure will be forever, you know? No, I don't think it works like that. And that's why these things fail. You know, because you come with a proposition, here's the template, come on, attach yourself together, form this crystalline structure. You know, it doesn't work. Yeah, so we're mapping projects and you're mapping resources. Essentially, as an incubator, you provide that service of giving people access to people and resources, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I have a pretty well developed way I'd like to do these kind of hash bins, which are ideas that basically a memetic sort of database structure. And it doesn't what I'm trying to do is connect knowledge repositories and make them like more living centers of fun and discovery.
Yeah, there's a lot of work in that field.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of work. You can, there's Nettention also. Nettention, I think was a beautiful project.
The what?
Nettention was a beautiful project.
Nettention? What?
Nettention was the most ambitious project that I saw for that.
What is that? What, can you write it?
So it's network intention. Nettention. It's a marketplace of intentions, and it was a nice model. The guy working on it was brilliant.
Like, people think that you can just search for anything, but the problem is you just can't. You can't Google anything you want, because sometimes you don't know what your problem is, or where like you can't describe the solution even if you know kind of what it is.
All of us should see the Peer-to-Peer Foundation wiki as a repository that is kind of raw. You know, it represents how Michel Bauwens thinks.
Right.
But that's a commons. That's this wiki. I find it as an extension of Sensorica, and that's my starting point. So for me, it's useful, and we should consider it as a shared resource among ourselves and as an extension of our activities, and build formal bridges with that too. You see what I'm saying? It's all this network mentality, you know, that the culture, and not thinking that that's his and this is mine.
We need more commons librarians who, you know, help you navigate the commons, because a library without a librarian, you have no idea how to find anything. That's the problem. Emergent
sort of narrative process for tracking the evolution and codifying governance incrementally.
Yeah.
It seemed to me that just something that seemed really suitable and is an unmet need right now, and
Yes.
an unarticulated process, a process that no one's actually articulated well and made repeatable. So if someone made that a repeatable service that you could tap, seems like a really unique value proposition. And in terms of the wiki, it strikes me that even just tracking the EKG, so to speak, of the signals coming from the wikis, rather than informationally, content-wise, as seeking to homogenize or network or link them as a reference, simply just having a record of them to say, well, this one's activity, like when you look at repos on GitHub, and the first thing you look at is the little green line, and you see that this repo was modified 2 days ago, and you see activity. That makes you care, right? Something like that for those peer-to-peer wikis would be useful. Just to know the activity level and where's the activity and which information subject areas are being evolved today and which ones were being evolved a year ago here. Just being able to see that on a big dashboard would be terribly valuable.